Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kristen Weber, and I'm the Regional Director for the Northern Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. We have an office here in Traverse City, but we serve the entire state. Before we get started on the presentation, I just want to let everyone know that some of the things that we're doing in the community. We have caregiver support groups to support people who are caring for loved ones with Alzheimer's or dementia. And we meet twice a month here in town. We also have our annual walk, the Alzheimer's Association Walk to End Alzheimer's. That's going to be here in Traverse City on September 28th from 9 to 11. And we meet right back here behind the library. That's going to be a really fun event. You don't have to plan on walking. You can just come if you'd like. It's family friendly. The bookmobile will be there, and we have a lot of other fun things. And that's just we call it a big support group. It's just a fun event that you're welcome to come to. I did bring my info. You can reach out to me anytime or stop into the office during our office hours. So today we're going to be talking about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Our objectives, you can read here. We're going to talk about typical age-related memory changes in thinking and behavior compared to concerning changes. We're going to talk about the common warning signs, discuss some tips for talking to someone about some concerns that you may see, because often it's somebody else that will notice the changes before we can see them ourselves. We're going to talk about the importance of early detection and the benefits of a diagnosis. 5 years ago, if somebody was diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, there wasn't really any treatments. You were just told, okay, please come back in a year and we'll see how you're doing there. Now, the association, we call it our era of treatment. There are studies that are showing things that you can do to actively, toward prevention. There are drugs that have been approved by the FDA that have been shown to slow the progression of the disease. So there's a lot of exciting things happening and a lot of hopeful things happening. That's why early detection can be so important. Identify possible tests and assessments for the diagnostic process, and you'll learn about some of the resources that we have available through the association. All right, we'll get started here. This is a story that can be common and typical for people in the beginning. Mary, a 73-year-old widow, lives alone. She's a retired teacher who has always meticulously cared for her home. Her daughter, Lydia, has recently been noticing laundry pile up and junk mail and old newspapers lying around the house. So I think the key here, and this is just an example of what the sisters might be talking about, is that this is a change for their mom. Normally she keeps the house clean and she keeps up on things like her appointments and all of that. So they're noticing this as something different. So let's get into the 10 warning signs.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein, and frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
And this is a common question that we get at the association is, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? So dementia is the umbrella term, and then there's different types of dementia underneath that, Alzheimer's being one of them. My father has a type of dementia that's caused by Parkinson's, and my mother has a vascular type of dementia.
Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So we'll go into the 10 warning signs here. And I like to just remind people, again, I feel like all of us, especially in this day and age when we're so distracted, can have problems with memory, or we forget where we put our keys, something like that. But I guess using the keys as an example, it wouldn't be so concerning if you occasionally forgot where you placed your keys. But if you looked at your keys and didn't understand what they were used for, that would be a different concerning. All right, let's warning sign number 1, memory loss that disrupts your daily life. One of the most common signs of Alzheimer's is forgetting recently learned information, forgetting important dates or events, asking the same questions over and over again, and increasingly relying on memory aids if you haven't in the past. What's typical age-related change? Sometimes forgetting names or appointments, but remembering them later. Again, I just feel like I have yet to meet someone that says, "Oh, I'm so great at remembering names." So it's really just if it's disrupting someone's daily life and it's a change from the norm. All right. The second warning sign is changes in planning or solving problems. Some people may experience changes in their ability to develop and follow a plan or work with numbers, which may result in trouble following a recipe that you've used for a long time or keeping track of monthly bills. Difficulty concentrating or taking much longer to complete tasks. What's typical age-related change? Making occasional errors when managing finances or household bills. And, for me, this was one of the first signs that I saw with my mom was she'd just always been so great with her finances and, kept good records with them. But then we were starting to see, bills that had been missed, mail that hadn't been opened and had just been put to the side. Um, Forgetting, she did forget a recipe that she had normally cooked every Thanksgiving. So, things like that that were just kind of out of the norm for her. And I heard another story recently about someone whose husband was a farmer, and he had used all kinds of farm equipment throughout his life. But then he decided to hire somebody instead of using this one particular piece of equipment himself. And she didn't think that was a red flag at all, because, you know, he was getting older, and it would make sense that you'd want to hire somebody to do to use a big piece of equipment like that. It wasn't until a little bit later that he had told her that he hired that person because he just couldn't remember how to turn it on. So, you know, that would have been an easy sign to miss. But again, making the occasional mistakes or forgetting for a minute, you know, or for a few seconds how to do something because you're distracted, that's different. And again, this speaks to what I just said, difficulty completing familiar tasks. People living with dementia commonly have difficulty completing daily tasks. Driving to a familiar location. I feel like we've heard stories of just people feeling lost. That was a sign that we saw with my dad too. It wasn't so much that he didn't have the ability to drive anymore. It was just that he was getting to a place and then couldn't remember how to get back, or couldn't remember how to, you know, use the GPS to get him back, you know, things like that. Organizing a grocery list, remembering the rules of a favorite game. What's typical age-related change in this area? Occasionally needing help to use the settings on a microwave or to record something. I mean, my goodness, if I didn't have my teenage sons to help me, you know, program my remote or whatever tech help I needed, I I would be a little bit lost in that area. But I think the key here is familiar tasks. If I had always known how to program a remote, and then suddenly I just could not figure it out anymore and didn't even know how to get started with it, that would be a warning sign. So the key there is completing familiar tasks. I know with tech advances all the time, it can be really hard to keep up with that. So if you've never known how to do it and you still don't know how to do it, that's not concerning as if you knew how to do it and now you're forgetting how to do it. Confusion with time or place. Warning sign number 4. People living with Alzheimer's or other dementias can lose track of dates, seasons, or the passage of time. They may have trouble understanding something if it's not happening immediately. They could forget where they are or how they got there. What's typical age-related change? Getting confused about the day of the week, but figuring it out later. Again, I feel like all of us can forget what day it is at times if we're busy, or definitely forget the date if we haven't looked at it someplace or needed to know for that day. Again, in my family, this looked like us moving from my mom and I moving from Colorado, where we lived for over 20 years, to Michigan, and then my mom really struggling to understand that she was no longer in Colorado. So that's what it looked like in our family. A little bit different than just somebody not remembering the date. Again, a piece of this is forgetting how they got here. You know, I needed to explain to my mom quite often why we were no longer in Colorado and why we were in Michigan. A little bit different than just not remembering the date. All right, number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. For some people, having visual problems is a sign of dementia, which can lead to difficulty with balance, trouble reading, problems judging distance and determining color or contrast, which can cause issues with driving. That spatial relationship, again, talking about some of the stories I've heard around driving becoming unsafe for people. You know, we pull up to a light and we stop there before the light. But if you're having spatial issues, you can pull up under the light, or you could be more likely to hit a curb when you're turning. It's just your brain changes, not understanding the spatial relationships, you know, around distance, things like that. Difficulty with balance, and this is one that many people don't know is is a pretty common early warning sign of dementia and Alzheimer's, is trouble with balance. If you have a loved one who is suddenly just having a lot of falls, or tripping over, you know, things a lot, or seems a little bit unsteady on the stairs. The changes in the brain happening in those early stages can really affect a person's balance. Again, it's just all related to these visual changes. And that was definitely one that we saw with my father, was he just started to really really need aides, or someone holding on to him, because he was losing that ability to kind of feel where he was in space and know how to navigate that. All right. Yeah. Yeah, it would. I mean, I remember when my mom started falling, and she, you know, it was she was walking on an uneven road, you know, so it would be expected that it would be hard. Um, yeah, it is. And so I think you want to look for patterns. You want to look for um, probably significant changes in that area. Maybe get some supports and see if that helps. I love, you know, just coming from Colorado where many people like to hike. Everybody uses those hiking, I don't know what they're called, the hiking walking sticks, just to be safe, you know, when you're hiking on uneven terrain. Um, we got some of those for my mom, and even with those supports, she was still struggling because the spatial issues kind of translate it. The supports became part of that, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it can be difficult. I feel like all of these warning signs can be difficult because, again, we're all so distracted these days. You know, we all can have memory issues. We all can have balance problems. I mean, if you have an inner ear cold, you know, you could be feeling dizzy and unsteady. So I think the key is look for patterns, see if there's improvement, or if it's getting worse. Yeah. Thanks. New problems with words in speaking or writing is another warning sign. People living with Alzheimer's or dementia may have trouble following or joining a conversation. They may stop in the middle of a conversation and have no idea how to continue. They can repeat themselves. They can struggle with vocabulary, have trouble naming a familiar object, or use the wrong name. What's a typical age-related change? We all sometimes have trouble finding the right words. We all sometimes can struggle with vocabulary. We can forget names or objects. or definitely can repeat ourselves too. That can be common for everybody. But when it becomes concerning is if you're seeing an increase in it, stopping in the middle of a conversation, but then just not able to get themselves back on track and just kind of letting it go, I think, is how it can present itself there too. Again, just using my my mom as an example, she started to use different words for the object. She would kind of move past not remembering what the word is and just kind of her brain would assign it a different name. Now, as a mom myself, and I have sometimes called my kids like by their brothers, start to call them by their brother's name. I feel like every parent does this at times, and my mom, and yeah, that's I mean, I think it's endearing. It doesn't mean we're thinking about all of our kids, right? But from my mom also, you know, has called all of her kids sometimes by a different name if she's talking about a story or something. But there was just such an increase in that. It was happening every time. And it would happen as opposed to just, you know, when you hear yourself doing it, you can kind of say, oh, well, I mean, you know, this person. But for her, she wasn't able to catch herself and she was continuing the story as if it was the person that she was naming when it was, you know, she was meaning the other person. So again, it can be subtle, but I say again, just look for patterns and see if that's increasing. Repeating themselves, I think this is a common one for folks. You know, if somebody tells you a story, but then 5 minutes later maybe is telling you the same story, you know, again, it can be a warning sign, but just see if you notice that happening quite often. All right. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. A person living with Alzheimer's may put things in unusual places. They may lose things and be unable to go back over their steps to find them. They can often accuse others of stealing, which may occur more frequently over time. What's typical age-related change? Misplacing things from time to time and retracing steps to find them. I feel like sometimes I'll walk into a room and not remember why I was there. So then I go back to my starting place and then suddenly it'll all come back to me. But concerning is if a person is not able to kind of retrace their steps or if they just forget, you know, what they were looking for there. You know, this point about accusing others of stealing, that can look like it's not a malicious thing. It's like, can you imagine if you thought something was yours and then somebody came and took it? Or you thought something was yours and you were getting ready to leave a place, well, you'd want to take that with you. The Alzheimer's Association works with local first responders and throughout the state, the nation, in first responder police trainings. You know, when I lived in Colorado, there was a woman who was arrested in a Walgreens because they said she had shoplifted something. And, you know, what a scary thing for her. And it turned out that she had dementia and she truly she thought that item was hers. And so, you know, giving first responder training, giving police training in being able to help with those kinds of situations. Because, that can be a tense situation. But again, if you really truly think that something is yours, that can be a warning sign too. Let's hear more about that, actually.
People wonder if, if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say, for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it. We can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in and they set their keys down in an unusual space, so there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door. I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
It can be subtle, but all right. Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. People living with Alzheimer's may experience changes in judgment or decision making. They may use poor judgment when dealing with money, pay less attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean. What's a typical age-related change? Making a bad decision or mistake once in a while, like neglecting to change the oil in the car. And I know another reason that the Alzheimer's Association works with first responders and police is around scam prevention, because it's getting very sophisticated these days. People being targeted, by scammers and all of that. So that doesn't count, around having poor judgment when dealing with money. That's, I feel like we all need to learn how to keep ourselves safe from scammers. But again, I'll use my mom again as an example. She started to tell me that I had to go to the bank today and get a new debit card because somebody tried to take money off of this debit card. And then, she kind of didn't want to let me get involved in it at that point. But then turns out that had been the 3rd time in 6 months that she'd had to go get a new debit card because she had said that somebody was charging something off of it. And it turns out that she was just didn't have the best judgment around keeping her things safe online. My son works in IT, and he was trying to help his grandma figure out how to be safe online, but then she just wasn't able to continue to do that. Paying less attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean, and that can just be because you're forgetting your routine. And if no one is there to prompt you or remind you of that, or why would you want to take a shower if you thought that you had done it already, things like that. That was another one that we noticed too, was the issue with hygiene. Decreased or poor judgment too, especially in the frontotemporal type of dementia. That can look like having no filter when you speak or when you say something to someone. We always laughed in our family because my mom would always say, "I've just got no filter," which is part of why we love her. But if it's turning into wow, that's such a different way for them to behave, or they're saying inappropriate things, again, this is where the first responders can come in and need some training too, because the change in your brain can cause that type of behavior. And we just need to do better at recognizing that. All right. Number 9, and this one makes, it makes sense given all we've talked about, withdrawal from work or social activities. A person living with dementia may experience changes in the ability to hold or follow a conversation. So, naturally as a result, they can withdraw from hobbies, social activities, or other engagements, and have trouble keeping up with a favorite team or activity. What's typical age-related change? Sometimes feeling uninterested in family or social engagements. Yeah, so again, if it's not the norm for your loved one to be withdrawn or not wanting to be around others, that could be a warning sign. And again, it makes sense if someone is struggling to keep up with a conversation, it would be very uncomfortable to put yourself in that position, more and more. And lastly, changes in mood or personality. People living with dementia may experience mood and personality changes, such as becoming confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. Get easily upset at home with friends or when out of their comfort zone especially. What's typical age-related change? That's developing very specific ways of doing things and becoming irritable when a routine is disrupted. Let's hear from the expert around this.
Of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more irritated or more impatient or a little moody or have a shorter fuse or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
Yeah, and just with many of these, I think the key is if this is a change, if this is new for that person. Oftentimes, a family member will say that, wow, my parent or my spouse has never said a cuss word in their life, and now they're freely using that, which doesn't have to be bad in and of itself, but if that's a change for your loved one, if they are normally, pretty happy, easygoing, and then become, suspicious or very short fuse or angry, that can be a sign too. These are warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, but just want to say, something like depression, confusion, that can be so many things. It could be some medications can have that effect on people. So I forgot to mention that in the beginning. I just want to put that in there now. And let's hear from the expert.
Of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more easily irritated or more impatient or a little moody or have a shorter fuse or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
It would be fun if he gave some examples within his conversation.
Well, I might have been, yeah. Did I play that twice for y'all too?
Yeah.
See? There you go. But see, that's typical for me when I'm giving a presentation, to get a little thrown off.
It would just be fun as he's making his comments if he just stopped. What was I saying?
Yeah, I mean, you have, yes, and you do have to, you have to have a sense of humor about it, because this all can sound very scary. But again, like I said in the beginning, especially in 2024, when we've all got cell phones, we're all so distracted with everything. Attention and memory is just kind of we're taking a hit there as a society because we are so distracted and then overwhelmed with information.
Sure, I'm sure it's not a new idea, but having a presenter, as you are, in a workshop, exhibiting all of these symptoms, and then asking the class, so to speak, what they saw, would be a springboard for this.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I will put out there now that the Alzheimer's Association loves to have, volunteers. If anybody wants to be an actor for us at our, let me know. Yeah. Are we ready for our Q&A soon? Okay, let me,
I'm
let's
ready.
get back there. You have some questions? Okay, I'll leave it on this slide just for review.
I was gonna say I never believed that my grandmother had Alzheimer's because she was the sweetest thing to me all the time until I saw her with my mom. And my grandmother was the sweetest little lady, but she was my mom's stepmom.
Mhm.
And they had a tumultuous relationship growing up, but they were fine. But she'd see me and she'd light up like a flower and, just was so sweet. And then she'd look at my mom and she'd call her evil and just start yelling stuff at her. And I was like, whoa, I've never saw her like that. And that's when we realized that
Yeah,
something was going on.
yeah, and I think, how hard would that be,
Yeah.
That's another reason that we have caregiver support groups in all parts of the state. We also have them virtually because it's such a different kind of grief and loss. You're kind of okay. It's a different kind of grief and loss because you're losing the person kind of in pieces, and then how could you not take that personally?
Oh, yeah. She definitely did.
Does anybody have any other questions or want?
If you're dealing with a person who's having memory problems, and what's the best approach to be realistic and quite honest, which sometimes results in defensiveness and being insulted and all. What's the best general approach in these situations?
That's hard, and that's very common because I feel like most people would get a little defensive. You know what I mean? Even if you're coming from a place of care and love. So maybe suggesting just a doctor visit. For my mom, it helped when it was my siblings and I and her grandchildren together talking to her, saying we've all noticed. It was harder for her to get defensive with just one of us when we were all there saying, we're concerned, we've noticed this. That's a hard one, and that's very common. So I would say, kind of taking, if you can have somebody else on your side that's also seeing concerns, or if you could try to get that person to go to the doctor and speak to the doctor with you, things like that. It's hard.
Look looking on the other side of it, it's hard for me to keep my patience, having been asked the same question 4 times.
Oh my goodness.
And sometimes I lose it, and
Absolutely.
then I feel bad about myself.
Absolutely. That is so hard, but it is so common. And exactly what you just said is what I hear in every single caregiver support group. I feel so guilty. I experienced it with my mom because caregiver, you need a break. You can't, it's so hard to just listen to the same story. It's so hard. I mean, I can't imagine what your mother was feeling, you know, being called evil. It's like, you know, we cognitively, we intellectually know that it's the disease, but we're human. So we have to just give ourselves a lot of grace. I don't like to give any of our presentations, you know, even the research-based ones and all of that, without talking about caregivers and what they do and what we offer for caregiver support. Because what you just said is, it's normal, it's common, and that's why we have those support groups. We also have a helpline. I'll just tell you that too before I forget. And our helpline is staffed 24/7, 365 days a year by master's level clinicians and social workers. I have some cards, I think, with the helpline number on it, but that helpline number is for anything. It's if you want information and resources, if you are just so upset, you know, frustrated, and you just feel like you can't hear another story, you can call that line too. They'll triage for safety if you want them to, and they can provide one-on-one care consultations for you. But yeah, that's hard, and we're human, so that's normal.
I do have one other quick, while I have the floor. One other technical question. You said that your mother's dementia or Alzheimer's was based on a circulatory pattern change. How was that diagnosed?
Do you mean the vascular dementia? So she has had heart problems for many years and blood pressure issues and that. So it was diagnosed with an MRI. First she went to her primary care physician though, at the request of my sister and I. She agreed to let us come along, and they gave her just, I can't remember the name of the test. It's a memory test for confusion and all of that. And then based on those results, and then also based on what the doctor was hearing from, you know, my sister and I and our concerns, he did order an MRI for her. And then the results of her MRI showed that there was changes in that one part of the brain, the hippocampus, that showed that it was vascular. So it can be difficult to get a diagnosis too. You know, there's the different types of dementia. You know, Parkinson's. My father has a Parkinson's one, so just because you have Parkinson's doesn't mean that you're going to get the Parkinson's type dementia. I mean, a lot of people don't. But it was something that because he had Parkinson's that his doctor looking for.
So there really isn't anything what he was saying about if they're saying, you know, where's my car? Where's my car? Where's my car? They say the same question over and over again. There really isn't. You just have to kind of be within yourself to let it not get to you. You can't just say, go check your list or whatever, because they might not remember where the list is or the things that you answered already, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what's so difficult about it, right? Because as a human, you're just like so frustrated, and you want to help them as well. And so, you know, I can remember trying to write lists for my mom, but then she would lose the list or couldn't follow the list. You know, things like that. So really just getting support for yourself. We have another program that we give called communication, tips for caregivers. Wow, if somebody follows those communication tips every single time, they're a superhero. We're all human. So it can be just so hard. Yeah, because there's that de-escalation piece, right, too. If you're a caregiver, you kind of learn what's going to escalate them. I mean, imagine if somebody was telling you, hey, the grass is blue, and you're like, what? It's green. And they're insisting to you, no, you're wrong, no, you get a little escalated. So that's why kind of a little part of that communication tips and tricks is you enter that person's world. You don't try to get them to come into your world. And some people say, well, I wouldn't want to lie to them. And it's kind of like, no, they really don't have the ability to understand this is your reality, but their reality is this. I think an example of that is if there's a person who talks about maybe their mother or another relative, but you know that that person has passed away maybe even like 30, 40 years ago, it's not recommended that you tell them. Your mother passed away, years ago. What are you talking about? You enter their world and you just reassure them, oh, your mother is safe, she's safe, don't worry about it. Or another example, I need to leave, I have to go see so and so. Well, we can do that, we'll do that tomorrow when it's a little bit nicer out. But that's the professional recommendation, that you enter their world instead of trying to, and that can be so hard to do all the time.
Number 9, withdraw from work or social activities. I guess, does it normally show that a person who, starting with Alzheimer's, knows that people don't want to hear them talk anymore, like they're repeating themselves? Does the person know that himself, and just says, okay, I don't want to be a part of it anymore? Is that part of it?
Some people do. Some people do. I see both when I facilitate our caregiver support groups. I see, a spouse who will say, my husband is in the end stages and he never knew or understood, even in the beginning, that he had Alzheimer's and dementia. Never understood, never knew that there was any problem. But then I hear from other families who are just like, my loved one is struggling so much right now, because she knows that she understands what's happening. And so that isolation from that can be because the person is aware that they're not following the conversation, or that they're not, that can be the cause of that. So I guess to answer your question, like, it depends on the person. I honestly, and just in my experience too, I feel like it's about 50-50 really of what I hear, people understanding that they have it and then people not. So yeah, I think well, I have cards with our helpline number on it too, if you'd like. You can make it for our walk on the 28th in the morning. It's going to be fun.
There's something scheduled tomorrow morning at
Yes.
11.
Yep, she's doing the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia tomorrow at 11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where we'll really get into our helpline is out there. Yeah, thanks. We'll really get into the different types of dementia,
Oh, okay.
tomorrow. And all of that. Did you want a card?
Sure.
Okay.
Is that, you got something going at 11 tomorrow then?
Yep, will we be in the same room?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Was the webinar done at 30 minutes after?
No, it should have still.